Luxembourg's foreign minister has claimed the European Union could collapse shortly. This viewpoint is shared by a number of other EU politicians, but they have different reasons for believing a possible breakup is possible.
The European Union can break apart. That can happen incredibly fast when isolation instead of solidarity, both inwards and outwards, becomes the rule.
If we do not deliver some immediate and concrete actions on the ground in the next few days and weeks, I do believe that the European Union and the Europe as a whole will start to falling apart.
Well, given that no common EU solution has so far been agreed to solve the refugee crisis, some member states are taking things into their own hands, tightening border controls and introducing checks between countries of the Schengen Free Movement Treaty is now commonplace. The Prime Minister of Malta has announced too the closure of a number of roads and a limit on sea traffic ahead of the Valletta summit on migration, citing security reasons. France is imposing border controls for 1 month during UN climate talks. However, Paris claims the measures have nothing to do with the refugee crisis. Germany and Austria also tightened security and border checks until November to halt the refugee influx. Well, for more on this, we're now joined live now by journalist and broadcaster Brian McDonald. Thanks very much for giving us your time this afternoon. Firstly, what do you make of these comments by Luxembourg's foreign minister? I mean, is he exaggerating when he says the EU might dissolve in only a matter of months? I mean, it's a big claim, and time is running out if it is correct, isn't it?
No, he's not. I mean, I think, what he's saying is hardly surprising. In fact, he mightn't be going far enough. As we saw with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, another union of many states in the late part of the 80s and 90s, when these things tend to break up, it happens very quickly, and it's often comes from something that you don't suspect. I think the refugee crisis has just thrown, more petrol on a fire that's been burning in Europe for the last couple of years. There's a massive detachment between the elite who run the continent and the citizens of the continent. And, at a time when there are homeless crises in some countries, like here in Ireland, when there are severe unemployment problems and severe economic problems in other states, to be admitting, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, no matter how deserving they are, and most of them are very deserving, it's not going to go down very well. And of course, it's going to fracture the Union. And we see that already in southeastern Europe, in the Balkans, and we see it now spreading into Germany. And that's the big, big worry, because just as the Soviet Union began to break up when the biggest constituent country, Russia, began to tire of the idea, that's what could happen to the EU if the Germans end up turning against the very idea of further union.
It's a problem, though, that can't be ignored. So what's the solution?
Well, I mean, the basic thing I don't want to go too far into it now, but we can argue that given the fact that most of the European Union countries are members of NATO, they should have realized when they supported intervention in Libya and Syria, not all of them supported the Iraq intervention, that's fair enough, but they should have realized that there was the potential for blowback here, that if people became dislocated, they might try to go towards Europe. That is what has happened. And now we have a situation where, can I just give an example here in Ireland, where we have actually got a homeless crisis at the moment in a country that's supposed to be one of the top 10 richest countries in the EU, if not the world. And, I can only imagine in poorer EU countries, how are they going to deal with thousands, if not hundreds and tens of thousands of people arriving at the same time? We see Sweden creaking at the moment. We see Hungary wanting nothing to do with it. We see that, going up into Slovakia, into Austria. And now, as I said a minute ago, it has come to Germany itself. And, if the Germans become disenfranchised from the European project, really, God help Europe.
Sure, but closing the border is just going to displace the problem, isn't it? I mean, if all countries do this, what problem has been solved? It will only make it worse, won't it?
You're just pushing it back. I mean, what you're doing is, if you close the borders from Germany down to Austria, down to Slovenia and into Croatia, all you're doing is pushing everybody into Serbia, for example, and just creating a massive logjam there. I mean, that's no solution either. But as I said, we're just seeing a massive, disconnect between the people who govern Europe and the people they govern, the citizens of Europe. And I think, it's coming home to roost now. And just very interestingly, if we think back to 1 year ago or 2 years ago, before this refugee stroke migrant crisis started, there was already, growing discontent in Sweden, in the United Kingdom, as evidenced through the success of UKIP. In France, we see through Front National, against migration to Europe and to those individual countries of people from other countries. Now we suddenly have the migration intensified dramatically, and of course, I mean, that's going to lead to further tensions.